Hi everyone, welcome to my first flipped classroom lesson. This lesson is going to help you get started with your essay writing. Today you received your first essay, your first full essay I should say, that you will be writing for me this year. So the first step that you will always take when writing an essay is to create what we call a thesis statement. Now that phrase can sound, kind of scary, what is this? But there's no need to fret about it. You might have heard about it in other classes and actually worked with it a little bit, but believe it or not, even if you haven't worked with it elsewhere, you have actually started the building blocks of a thesis statement in our English class just without realizing it. The reason that I say this is because a thesis statement is pretty much a claim. The only difference is a claim is an argument for your paragraph, whereas a thesis statement is broader and is an argument for your entire paper. It tells the reader what you are going to argue to be true. Now let's talk about for a second that verb argue or the noun argument. We see that a lot and we look at it as these crazy hot topics like cats versus dogs, Obama versus Romney, although that's kind of dated now. But anyway, an argument doesn't always have to be this heated discussion. Basically, when you're writing your papers, especially about literature, they're usually just going to be an opinion that you have that you can back up with evidence from the text. So with that said, before we get into actually writing a thesis statement, there's just a couple things that you need to know about the basics. The first thing that you need to know is that it is a thesis statement. So you notice my enunciation there. It is one sentence. So while it's very similar to writing, the claim always says buddy, the add to. The thesis statement does not. It is just one sentence. The next thing to know is where it goes. The thesis statement, 9 times out of 10, will be the last sentence in your introduction. As you become a more skilled writer throughout the years, you might learn to vary it, but for now I would stick with keeping it as the last sentence. That's where I will expect it to be, and probably teachers and even professors in the future will expect it to be. So now that you know the basics of a thesis statement, it's time to start outlining the steps to writing one. This is where it's going to sound very familiar to writing a claim. But again, remember, a thesis is only one sentence. You will not have an add to. So the first step, like many claims that we have written, is to look at the question you're being asked. So I have this question that's a little different from yours. The prompt is, what kinds of monsters do people face in life? I need to analyze this prompt. I know that I need to talk about monsters, and I'm going to be talking about monsters in real life. I'm not going to be necessarily talking about a monster in a story or vampires or something like that. So that narrows my topic down. But I also know that I need to use the literature to support the monsters that people face in life. So I need to tie that in somewhere. That really helps me with my who and my what. If I'm going to be talking about literature, who's responsible for literature? Bingo, the authors. So that becomes my who or my what, the authors of the Facing Monsters unit. Now my next step is to figure out either how or why they accomplish what is said in the prompt. Okay, so revealing the monsters in real life. I decided for my next step to go with how. It's just flew naturally for me. So my how is I'm going to figure out how exactly these authors revealed the monsters. And the way they did this is I know monsters are usually antagonists, so that led me to write present particular antagonists and conflicts. Okay. Now, because I answered how for that step, my next step is going to be to answer why. Why did the authors present these antagonists? They did this to represent the various monsters that people face in life. And then finally, you put it all together. I won't waste your time by reading it out loud. It goes in the steps that I actually took. So my who and what, how and why. And this is the stage when you get it all written out. You can play around with flipping the why and the how if you want, if you think it makes more sense that way. But you definitely want to follow the steps initially and then play around with it afterwards. Okay, so those are the steps to writing a thesis statement. Now we're going to give it a try and see if we can come up with strong thesis statements for the essay that you have been assigned.